annual domestic spending for the next 5 years.
A freeze on spending sounds good, but is it enough? South Dakota Congresswoman Kristi Noem joins us live now to discuss. Good morning to you, Congresswoman.
Good morning, Gretchen. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So the president laid out this 5-point plan of innovation, education, infrastructure, deficit reduction, and reforming government. It seems to me, though, he was kind of speaking out of both sides of his mouth, because on the one hand, some of the stuff sounded conservative, and on the other hand, a lot of it sounded liberal. What was your reaction?
Well, you know, it was difficult to see how it could possibly exist in reality, because he talks about setting our spending levels and freezing them for the next 5 years, yet we're continuing to spend at a deficit levels. So if we do that for the next 5 years, we'll continue to add to our debt, which will make our country even more unsustainable.
Do you notice that he has really run to the center from where he was a year ago?
It is, absolutely, in his talk and in his presentation. You know, truly you can gauge somebody by their actions, and that's what we'll keep our eyes on in the future.
You know, he talked about something that you serve on a subcommittee for, and that's going to be education. He didn't bring up labor and pensions as another one of your subcommittees. When it comes to education, who's against bettering our education for the next generation? No one. But why does it always have to involve money? Is there a way to do it and not spend?
There certainly is. We can add flexibility for school districts. We can make sure that we're allowing parents, teachers, administrators back closest to the child to have more authority over how they teach these children. And so that's what we're going to be focused on. I think the Education Committee has a real opportunity to work on a bipartisan manner. I hope we can all come to the table with solutions.
So racing to the top is still okay with you? The dollar figure is what you want to talk about?
Well, I'll tell you, racing to the top was good for a lot of states, but it was tough on states like South Dakota because they're competitive grants. We certainly didn't have the staff in our small rural schools to write those kind of grants and even be competitive. So we're going to have to work on that program, too.
Oh, well, good luck on that Education Committee, because I think you know, the unions are a very powerful force. And if you look over the past 20 to 30 years, America has spent exponentially on education, and our test rates keep going down. I want to move on to Paul Ryan's response, because he was very emphatic and some say very blunt about the state of our economy and the deficit. He says this: "We are at a moment where if government's growth is left unchecked and unchallenged, America's best century will be considered our past century." Was this a wake-up call?
Yeah, I agree with that. When you look at all the numbers and you look at it realistically as to where we're sitting right now and the trend that we're on, we absolutely have to turn it around, because our children won't have the opportunities that we had.
You know, when you look at the way the president laid out his speech, Congresswoman, in the beginning he was talking about all the investments in the future, and then at the back end he talked about how we need to rein in government and stuff like that. But it seemed like, you know, as the scales go on balance, we're going to wind up spending a whole lot more than we're cutting, and that's not going to get us out of the hole we're in right now.
Yeah, that's exactly why I say the reality of his speech last night is very difficult to imagine. How he would implement everything that he talked about would be extremely difficult. I don't see how it's possible. That's why we're going to have to really watch what he does in the future to see what his priorities really are, because that's how you really identify what he wants to accomplish.
And just to take what he is saying, he's saying, look at NASA. When we went to the moon, look at everything that we gained as consumers. When we decided with the Pentagon is the one where we really came up with the internet, as the government computer started talking to each other. Aren't those two examples of the government working, so the president does have something to build off of?
You know, it's not that all of us don't want to have that kind of research and innovation going on, but we have to get our priorities straight as well. We can't do it at the risk of spending more money than what we have, and that's what we've been doing. So we've got to get our priorities right. We've got to absolutely start working to balance our budget and then have a plan to pay off this country's debt so our economy can recover.
Congresswoman, I know you were not in Washington when the original health care bill passed, but you were there for the repeal vote. Were you surprised that the president talked about health care last night and left the door open to possibly revisiting tort reform and that 1099 for small businesses?
No, I think that's a winning speech for him if he really wants to be viable for 2012 elections. So he has to have that kind of a statement, believe in the policies that he pushed and promoted and got passed, but then also say that he's willing to work on reforms. Honestly, the best approach is that we repeal it and go back in and fix some of those huge mistakes that we have happened to our healthcare system to make our costs go so high.
Well, I hope you paid attention during orientation, because you have a bunch of huge jobs and a bunch of committees all demanding your attention. Congresswoman Noem, thanks so much for joining us.
Yep, thank you.
You bet. All right, 19 minutes before the top of the hour, we got a Fox News alert for you.
Uh-oh.
This is a live look at a police